morning, good evening, good day to people. I know there are participants across the globe. There are people from US, people from India. I know there were a couple of people joining from UK as well. So welcome all to this session that me and Scott together are doing on cloud applications and what do you want to think about, what are things that you should consider before deciding to move to cloud and how this cloud journey can become smoother. So that's the context in which both Scott and me are going to talk. Scott, good morning to you. Thanks for joining. I know you're joining from Portland. And I'm doing this from Chennai in India. I'm part of Doensis and Scott is part of Hackett Group. Together, we've done several engagements. We've been doing work together for almost 8-9 years now in several engagements. So it's always been a pleasure to work with Scott and his team. Welcome everyone for this session. And Scott, you want to share your thoughts before we get formally started with our presentation?
Yeah, certainly. I think the timing of this is great. Someone and I were just talking before this started. I did a session like this, very similar to this, back in 2014, maybe at Open World. And a lot of us didn't really have a good concept of how these projects were going to go. It was very early in the adoption period. But I think now we've got dozens under our belt. So I think we can tend to predict how companies are going to do going into the cloud just by looking at these considerations. So we'll share that with you, and hopefully that'll give you some insight into whether you're ready and how your project may go in the future.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Let me use the deck and we'll get this formally started using the presentation. Give me a second. Okay, so we're doing this together along with the Hackett Group. Scott is from Hackett Group and I'm from Doensis. A quick introduction about ourselves. I'm Somu Chokalingam with about 25 years of experience. Always have been worked on only one thing, and that's Oracle. And if you look at Doensis, all our look and feel is also very similar to Oracle in terms of logo presentation, because that's the only one thing that we do. Scott is an associate principal with Hackett, and he leads the Oracle Cloud Architecture team. Has worked. Quick introduction about Doensis. We're very happy that we've been awarded as Great Place to Work consecutively for the last 2 years, and we're also one of the top 20 mid-sized firms to work for. We've recognized as a great mid-sized firm in top 20. We're a little over 250 people, and 91% of all our people are certified. We have offices in US, Dallas in the US, Chennai and Trichy, 2 locations in India, and Toronto in Canada. Key things that we work on are packaged applications, which is Oracle EBS, or the cloud applications, which we mentioned is Oracle Fusion. We do a lot of software services, which is database and middleware support. We also do we have a special team which handles lift and shift onto cloud, which is part of the software services group. And then we also do software development using Oracle technologies. And we're very proud that a few of our employees together have written books on Oracle, which got published last year. And that's about 7 books that we got published last year in various technologies within Oracle, and a book on HR. That's a quick brief about Doensis, and I will let Scott introduce Hackett Group and himself.
Sure. So the Hackett Group is an intellectual property company. Many of you probably heard of us. What's unique about us is, we have put a lot of work into finding performance at a testable level, at an empirical level. So through benchmarking exercises, organizations are defined in terms of what they currently are, their levels of efficiency and effectiveness relative to their peers. But I think what makes us pretty powerful in the industry right now is that gap between where a company is, where they want to go into the cloud is defined. And we couple that with our delivery teams, and I'm a part of that team as well. And we really, transform business, and we're doing that around the globe currently with a lot of customers. And really, Oracle Cloud is probably our strongest area of interest. So we've got a lot of things cooking. We've stayed very busy even in this environment. Soma and I kind of figured out how to work remote 9 or 10 years ago. So we are close to capacity, and off we go.
That's good. Thanks, Scott, for that introduction. Quickly getting on to this context about Oracle Cloud applications. I know there's been different names that the solution and service has been having. In the past, people were calling this Fusion Applications, and then it got renamed. Sometimes you keep calling this as Oracle HCM Cloud, Oracle Financials Cloud, things like that, and then there's Oracle Cloud Applications. All of that is still the same. It's the new age applications which is built on the latest technologies, on a completely software as a service model. That's what we're going to talk here today about. There could be thoughts around when we say cloud applications, people could think whether this is going to be on infrastructure as a cloud or other things, but this is predominantly focused around software as a service, which is the Oracle Cloud applications. And we might touch upon things that could help you in terms of PaaS and other things, but the predominant focus is going to be about the cloud applications. I know one of the major benefits people always think about when they talk about SaaS is about trying to convert into an OpEx model from CapEx. I think that's one thing that keeps people thinking immediately. But beyond that, there are many things. When you're on-prem application, you pay support fees to Oracle, which is basically to get all the new innovations that they do and make best use of it. But then to use those new innovations on-prem, you have to upgrade your software, and that means a lot. There is a lot of technical effort that you'll have to do and then get there. But with the SaaS applications, with cloud applications, you don't have to spend doing all those upgrades. It comes to you on a quarterly basis. You could take benefit of it right away. So, Scott, I will hand this over to you to explain more about what you feel about cloud applications and how you have experienced this from the on-prem side, and what are the benefits that you and your customers have seen from here. Yeah, and what the cloud applications is about.
Yeah, I think just very recently, Oracle's done a lot to simplify their branding, of what is essentially hundreds of products under the cloud portfolio. So basically, we have two categories, as Soma was saying. I mean, you have cloud applications, and that's where your application offerings are at. So that's basically sales, finance, HR, and supply chain, a little bit of manufacturing as well. And that's what we're going to talk about today. If you go out to oracle.com, you're going to see basically two big pillars. One is cloud applications. The other one is cloud infrastructure, and they're calling it Gen 2 now, and that's as of the last 8 or 9 months. And Gen 2 is really just redesigning their development tools, their infrastructure tools to really be defined to work from a security standpoint in the cloud. And so those are the two big pillars. What we want to talk about really here on this slide is, what feels familiar. So we're going to assume that a lot of folks here are on-premise systems currently today. So that's going to be your EBS, your PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, potentially Lawson, a lot of them out there. They all kind of have the same, flaws and abilities. What I thought would be helpful is let's talk a little bit about what feels familiar and then what feels different. When you're an EBS person, as I was, what feels familiar when you look at the system that now resides in the cloud, the EBS data model and many of the familiar concepts, have crossed over to the cloud. So things like flex fields, list of values, the core tables are structured very similarly to EBS, including like your open interface tables like GL balances. In fact, many of your EBS queries will nearly run in the cloud with some tweaks here and there. PeopleSoft took some concepts with them, so things like trees, hierarchical data looks like PeopleSoft. If you've worked with OBIEE before, that's pervasive throughout the cloud. They've also taken Sbase, which is another OLAP data modeling cube, and they've got that into the GL as well. So every balance is in real time, accumulated. So at the end of the day, what you have is 25, 26 servers that are, stitched together to make the cloud. That's where things are the same. It really feels different though, and I think that's where you get a lot of you get a lot of thought from development teams and DBA teams as they go into the cloud for the first time. The UI is much, much different and feels much different than like EBS, the pro forms that you used to have there. Developers, in fact, will lose a lot of their go-to tools that they've been used to. So as it says on the slide there, the PL SQL is really not a language that has a lot of value anymore. For developers in the cloud, there's really no area to use that. DB links, you can't, directly get into the database that way. There's no app schema, so I think ultimately though, the key differences are based on the belief that, EBS, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, these systems were not contemplated to be mobile or searchable or social. In Oracle Cloud, you have like Google-like capabilities to find things that are buried among hundreds of items. You have the ability to automatically access cloud content from any device that you're on, whether it's your phone or a Kindle or anything like that. And the cloud seems to natively understand what device you're using, and it will recast the forms. So that's pretty neat. EBS could never do that. You also have this ability, and we're using this a lot more now, to use an embedded social network for things like projects. And that'll help team members get their work done very connected, and they don't have to go outside into a, Microsoft project or anything like that. It's all embedded within the value stream of Oracle. And I think that's what's happening. So I think that's where we're at, is there's new capabilities now, like social, that augments what you're doing, but it's also enabling a lot of new applications that just couldn't exist before in EBS. One final example, in HR, there's this ability now for recruiters to use something called workforce reputation management. And that will go out and analyze LinkedIn, and it'll analyze Facebook profiles for your candidates. It'll add content to to your hiring decisions. And that's all directly within the context of Oracle HCM. And so I think that it's enabled a lot of more modern use of software that a lot of our younger generation is much more used to. And I think that's a big reason companies are making this jump to the cloud. Other than what you had said, Somu, about CapEx to OpEx, the ability to stay current. It seems like a big jump, but I think that's a very important consideration.
That's good. I think the point that you highlighted, to get an application like this up and running, if you have to do this on-prem, that's so many servers that you'll have to run, configure, stitch together, and maintaining those servers should be a humongous task. But now all that happens behind the scenes without you having to put any teams to do that, and you enjoy the benefits of the new age applications. So that's very good. Now, some of the common questions that keep coming from most of the prospects and customers when they think about moving to cloud applications. The first thing we keep saying, you get all new innovations right away, right? So, but that means there is constant patching, there is constant new releases that happens, and how would customers catch up with us? Because in on-prem with EBS, one of the biggest challenge was we still have customers who stay on 11.5.10, which is almost 15, 16 years old, because they don't want, it's working, their business is running, they don't want to test something new, they're worried about all the customizations, things like that. But I think those are gone, those days are gone. You're going to see this seamless way of trying to use these new functionalities on a regular basis. But this brings up a lot of question to customers. How do they manage testing and how do they handle these new releases? Your thoughts on that, Scott?
Yeah, I think that's one of the big questions. I mean, forced patching is really scary for customers that are used to fully controlling their change schedule. And this occurs without debate from Oracle. So on the first calendar weekend of your quarterly update month, the new patch will be applied to your non-production instances. And then 2 weeks after that, it's happening on production, and you're getting those. The SLA for downtime, I think, is something like 9 hours of downtime, but it's normally much less than that, depending on what's included in the patch. And really what someone said is right. I mean, that's just the way of the world now. Whether you're on Salesforce, Workday, Oracle Cloud, that's the secret sauce of how they can guarantee that there's going to be less surprises as you go forward, because everybody's on the same version globally, and they've reduced the ability for us to really go in and change the underlying software. But I think there's some things that we need to kind of lay out here to make this a little less scary. You know, first of all, these upgrade events are not really upgrades, they're updates. So in general, new functionality is provided as offerings. Those offerings are all turned off for you by default. You can make the choice to turn those on whenever you want. And so what we've experienced typically as we look through our managed services group, you know, most of these patches come in and there's not a lot of impact. So, you know, best practices, you'll get some regression testing, make sure your implementer will provide those as a deliverable to you, that, you know, those tests that you're doing during the implementation for your mission critical processes, you want to have those. And there's a lot of tools in the market too that can automate your keystrokes in your system. So things like Subject 7, UiPath, which is a big partner of Oracle. You know, these are systems that will go in and simulate a user going in and doing some of your, you know, procure to pay processes, you know, whatever you have, to make sure that these become kind of non-events. Most clients very scared going into it, but then after 1 or 2 cycles, they start to get into their rhythm and go from there.
On the testing side of it, Scott, I think there are even open source tools like Selenium that you could use and script them. So it becomes much easier in terms of the cycles and making sure that your functionalities are working. So on a very similar and related topic from there is, whenever you do patching in on-prem, in the EBS world, the next immediate problem that comes to people's mind is customization. How does my customizations and integrations get impacted? So do I have to do a lot of rework and things like that? So from our experience, what we see is these customizations are very well structured, and they're more in either file-based or web services-based, but still it's kind of a bolt-on, and the open standards are pretty well defined. So the impact on such customizations are very minimal, and you know, very hardly people have to do rework when such quarterly patches happens. Any experiences and thoughts around that from you, Scott?
Around the patching, around the customization?
Customization, the impact of the new quarterly releases and customizations.
Well, the customizations, I think there's a myth out there that if you have a lot of customizations in EBS, then maybe that's going to be a much more difficult transition to go to the cloud because you've kind of altered your framework a little bit from what Oracle expects. And I think the short answer is, after 30 years of doing this, I've only ran into a handful of companies that had software that looked a lot like what Oracle delivered to them. That's just the way it is. In those companies, they didn't have any developers, so they didn't have any capacity to make any changes. So I think, that's a myth. All the customers that I'm working with, they're going to the cloud. They have these customizations in their system, and what our understanding is, what we've seen is, typically when we run an implementation, the client will come forth with, maybe 20 things that they really care about, that they've changed from Oracle or PeopleSoft. They want to make sure that that's there. I think you need to start with the premise that, no customizations are allowed in Oracle. If you have 20 that you come to us, maybe 16 of those, 80%, will be embedded within the current software. There's been a lot of changes in Oracle Cloud. So that leaves you with 3 or 4, changes that you have to just make some decisions around. And really then it just comes down to, ROI, return on investment. If this is something that really is driving your business value, basically tactically what we do then is we say, okay, this is something that was built in PL SQL. It's not going to be built in the cloud. We're going to build it on this other tool. And then it comes down to budget, how many hours you're going to have, and then making sure in your regression tests, you have the ability to make sure that customization continues to work in the system.
Right. But another good thing is, like what we did as personalizations in Oracle EBS, similar things can be done on the cloud. So there is a lot of things that you can do with a page creator and page composer. So that way, a lot of controls and look and feel and things like that can still be handled without customization. So,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely, yeah. You don't have the OAF framework like you did in EBS, but you do have a very robust personalization piece, called Page Composer, that allows you to, tailor your forms however you want them. You can hide fields, you can make other fields there, and then it's never an issue where you just can't go, because there are going to be ways to do very dynamic things, make new forms, use the PAS licenses to really start to alter things in a very safe way. So again, not something to be too scared about.
Right. And just for the interest of the participants, we have a book called Fly to Cloud, and that's really downloadable from doensis.com/books, which talks about this customizations and what are all the personalizations that you could do with some good examples. So, if you're interested, you could look at that. Since we spoke on PaaS and integrations, Scott, there is also another myth with people that when you work on Oracle Cloud applications, if you have to do integrations, then it's again only Oracle Integration Cloud that they will have to use. But ideally, they could use any other tools like MuleSoft and Ready API and things like that as well. So what are some of the common tools that you've used in terms of integrations, and how has that worked for you?
I've used them all. I mean, everything that's on the market. Oracle because you don't get access to the database anymore, it wraps the entire application in APIs. So there's literally thousands of APIs where you can reach into Oracle, search data externally. You can make updates, inserts, but it's all very formal. There's thousands of those. There's also a lot of templates for batch files so that you can import your batch files in. That's very common, and from banks and things like that. So MuleSoft, Dell Boomi, Tibco, Oracle still has SOA Suite. Oracle's product is called Oracle Integration Cloud. That the sweet spot of that is really cloud to cloud transmissions of data. And it's a tool that we use very, very heavily. In fact, that's always, basically we go into a client, and if they're running all of their integrations through like PL SQL, we let them know that, look, you're going to need to have some kind of development environment to do your mappings as you go from your boundary systems into cloud and vice versa. So, if a client that has nothing, we typically will recommend OIC because it's very seamlessly integrated with Oracle. The connections are it instantly, so that makes things pretty nice. But if you have a million lines of Java in your MuleSoft, that's going to work fine as well. So there's no need to just rip out your integration platform and build something new. So,
is there any open source integration tools that you've used, Scott?
Some of them are. It depends on the level of traffic that you have. I mean, if you have, if you're Amazon and you're running thousands of messages, every minute, then no, there's not as many options. But similar to what Oracle does with a lot of their products, if you throttle down the messages per hour, there are some, open source or very low cost options where you're talking, maybe several $100s a month to stage this data. And those are important too, because they also come with monitoring tools, because it's important to really track centrally what's happening and how to notify the right people when something doesn't work as you think it should.
Right, because many of the customizations that customers have today on-prem in EBS can become bolt-ons, can become integration through PaaS. So this is an option by which they could handle all their existing meaning not all, but at least their critical customizations through this path. Right, so there is an option for people to handle their custom process through cloud applications. So this is a fear that many people have been having while moving to cloud applications. There is a way to do that. Usual analogy that I keep saying is, if you live in an apartment, you can't customize. But if you live in a townhouse with some backyard, you could do something in your backyard and still integrate with your townhouse. So that's how your PaaS and
right.
Oracle Cloud applications work, right?
That's right. Yeah, there are tools too within the PaaS that will allow you to even build screens. So you can build UI that will look exactly like your other form screens, but then of course you use APIs to connect with Oracle. Right. And if you do that, then you can start to extend the application with your own forms, integrate with Oracle, and the user won't know the difference. They won't know that they've actually left Oracle Cloud and went to your platform to, for instance, import invoices or something like that. So there's a lot of creative work going on in that space right now. So not a barrier of entry.
That's right. And if people have been using Apex, Oracle Apex, that's still an option they could continue to use and integrate with Oracle EBS, cloud applications.
Yep. So Oracle started with the SOAP protocol. That was the big one that they rolled out their APIs, but they've really aggressively moving towards REST. And Apex is very, very good at REST communications. So using that protocol, we've got some very great examples of using Apex to continue. Look, if you have a mission critical and it's on Apex and you like it a lot, there's no reason to just throw everything out. I mean, there are ways to leverage what you're currently using that your teams are trained on to still get some value out of those.
Right. Good. And when we look at past data, now when customers move in from their on-prem application to cloud applications, how do they handle historic data? What's been your experience and what's your best practice that you would suggest to handle historic data?
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about this when we get to our considerations. obviously Oracle doesn't have a tool that automatically just takes your EBS data and then you bring up your cloud and all of a sudden, all your data's there. So it's a traditional ETL kind of work. You're extracting data out of your systems. You're probably transforming that because most, smart clients will take the opportunity of going to cloud and they'll model their business a little closer to what it is now. If you've been on EBS for 15 years, 20 years, your business is probably different, and so your chart of accounts may be different, and your department structures, your organizations, and so there's typically some mapping, a crosswalk that'll happen. Oracle's going to provide you with some templates. Implementers have simplified those, like Hackett. We have very simplified templates that makes it a little easier to extract the data. And then there's a very formal load process. If you're on EBS, you'll know, what an open interface table is, like GL balances. That all remains. And so there's a process where, it uses many of the same processes to load that data in, check syntax of your data, check the business rules, import the data in very, very safely. Best practice is, though, because this is a pretty heavy amount of work, you want to anticipate 3 cycles of doing your conversions. So the first time you run it, you maybe only get 50% success, and then the next time you run it, you get 85%. Third time, you've gotten everything figured out. So it's a process. It takes some time, but it is kind of what it is. It's a very important pillar of our implementation work.
Right. We've also had customers who take past data in some form, move it into PaaS, get some database as a service, move some critical data, and use that for the future reporting purposes. So that way, there are ways to link your on-prem and the cloud application and still verify things. So that's again a possibility as well.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with historic data is, you're typically not going to bring in every single stitch of data from your on-premise system. We work with companies that have literally 114 years of data, because they have newsletters that they send out and they want to make sure they know all the employees. You're not going to pull everything over. It gets kind of cost prohibitive, and the data is so dirty as you go back even 10 years that we stay away from that. So it's important to think about where your historic data is going to live. A lot of companies will keep EBS running read-only for a period of time to keep that available for statutory needs. Some other companies will have a data warehouse, and they'll put the historic data there. So that's what most implementers are gonna steer you towards is, take in what you absolutely need, but don't take in a lot more because it starts to delay your project.
I think quickly around that, when you have too much data, and also about when you run on a common server where you're on a SaaS model, customers have a concern about this noisy neighborhood, the term which is very popular nowadays with the SaaS applications. So how can people handle this? What is the right expectations to have? What's been your experience on that, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, noisy neighbor, you're going to hear that from Oracle when Oracle Sales talks a lot. It's part of their multi-tenant setup. So they roll out cloud with something called secure data isolation architecture. And that just means that data does not commingle in a single database. So your data is not going to be in the same database as other customers. Each customer receives their own dedicated database instance. And that's how they get around, because a lot of the work still is very database intensive. So you're not going to run into something where your neighbor is got a large job running and all of a sudden that slows you down for some reason. You get your own. The multi-tenancy of Oracle really refers to the host environment. So your Linux environment, that's shared, but there's not a lot of performance problems there, and there's no secure data there either. So that's how they roll that out.
Right. Okay, now we'll move on to the next topic about the key. I think that's the right statement there. If you had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend 6 sharpening the axe. So
Yeah.
around that, so what are things that people should prepare upfront so that their cloud applications migration is relatively easier? So, over to you, Scott, on this.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, this is, 7 years of us going through projects, many of them successful. Unfortunately, some were not, and we were able to kind of start to predict based on how ready a company is at that product launch, at the project launch, where they're going to be at. So I'm going to highlight these for you. If we come back and we're fortunate enough to win your work, this is the first couple of weeks we're going to go through this list. If you have good, thoughtful answers to all these, I think we'd predict that you're going to have a successful outcome. So the first one, profiling and cleansing of legacy data. I mean, that one, benefits are very clear. Take the opportunity of, when you're replatforming to some other environment, clarify your customer, your supplier lists, review your item master if that's something that's part of your scope. We've encountered a lot of delays of, our team and the extract team going back and forth before you even get data into Oracle, to make sure that, things are clean and that, your customers, for example, there's not a lot of duplicates around there. Your suppliers, if there's something that's inactive, you don't want to necessarily bring those over. So a lot of work that you can do there and cleanse that data. And typically in EBS or JD Edwards, PeopleSoft, that's a fairly streamlined process that you can do that. Next one, catalog business processes. Why would we care as an implementer? We're just going to put in a vanilla procure to pay process, order to cash process. Those are going to just come in. And really, implementers do want to care about that. And the reason is because, there's going to be a certain amount of change management that you're going to want to roll out to your teams. And whatever is vastly different in your flow today from what's going to be in the cloud, you're going to want to highlight that. And our implementers will be able to take and be flexible with some of your changes too. So that's why it's important for you to just go, have some flow charts available that says, here's how we run procure to pay. Here's hire to retire. These are all the processes we use, and those will be very helpful for the team to accelerate the project. Third one, we talked about this a little bit, some of the enterprise platform considerations. What is your reporting strategy going to be for analytics? How are you going to handle integration mapping if you typically just use PLC pool today? Another one is, does your federated single sign-on environment support synchronization with a cloud system like Oracle? These are very important considerations, and having those plans in place for the enterprise that goes around the cloud will be much better to address early than to do it as you're doing the Oracle cloud implementation. So that's an important one as well. Build stakeholder buy-in early. Delays are going to occur if your key stakeholder teams don't align with the vision of what you're trying to do. So setting expectations, getting priorities set up, understanding that, this is a high priority project will help, because this isn't just something where the implementers go in and put in a system that looks exactly like every other system. There's going to be decisions, and some of those are hard, and you want to get that buy-in early so that they can support that process. Next one, clear away non-essential reports. To me, there's going to be pushback if you dump on me an inventory of 1,000 reports and say, we just want you to replicate all these in the cloud. Because I think, in fact, that's a disservice to what we need to do. In the cloud, there's so many different ways to get access to data. It's not like the old on-premise where, the IT team gets a report request every 2 weeks and they're building a new report. And so if you don't do this properly, we tend to get an inventory of reports where of the 1,000, there can be 6, 7, 8, 9 reports that are all basically the same report, except they have a few more columns, or they have a few different query filters, things like that. So really streamline that. We would like to see something a little more like maybe a dozen reports or 24 reports at the top. You know, that's where you've done the work of saying, okay, this is really what's important to us and is not going to be available to us, so we actually need it. So that's important. Scope and improvement, obviously, think about the cloud as a journey. This is not like EBS where, you know, 10 years ago you did a big upgrade and then you're kind of done for a while. So scope of what you absolutely need to get in right away. I mean, typically our clients are very aggressive about getting that first piece in place. And so you're talking about, you know, not years of implementation work, you know, months of work to do this. Been just the things that are the most important, and then make sure that you understand that every 3 months there's opportunities for more and more improvement to come. So document what the high needs are. Security, Hackett's talking a lot about that right now. Security is an area that can look a lot different with each cloud client. So it's important to come to cloud with a specific point of view. So that the call out here is to have your security team early meet with the department leads, the department heads, really understand what your security policies are. There's normally, there tends to be a lot of, you know, argument between IT and the department leads when it comes to security. IT wants simple. You know, they want to be able to automate the roles. They want to be able to auto provision when someone joins the company. The business a lot of times will bring up a lot of, you know, outlier examples. This person needs to have all these different kinds of access, and they're the only ones that have it. And so we have 1,000 jobs, and we have 1,000 different sets of roles. And so you have to come in the middle there somewhere, and that takes a lot of time and thought. And so that's why it's important to really think those through, so that on the beginning of the project, you say, look, this is our policy around security. This is how we're going to handle it. And then the implementer will just do that. So that's important. Let's go on.
Around that, there's a question from one of the participants saying, when we do the data migration, how do you handle security from on-prem to cloud? So any thoughts around that?
Yeah. When you're doing data migration, if you're an EBS, you have responsibilities. Everything now is based on role-based. So everybody has a set of roles. And so when you migrate in the data, say it's an employee, you'll get all the employee structures, the assignments, everything like that. There's two different kinds of people in an organization. One will have basic employee rights. They can do what everybody can do. What you need to really think about early is the elevated roles. So the people that are in AP and they actually have to go in AP and they have to process payments, things like that. And so typically what we do is we get a list of all of the personas that make up the organization, and you get an Excel out and you start to map, these are the different roles that each person gets. And you try to hit the sweet spot where you don't have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of different types. And that helps to set the stage for what IT really wants to do, which is to auto provision folks when they come in and when they're deprovisioned as well.
But I think, Scott, the question is around data movement from on-prem to cloud. So I think he's talking about the data migration as such, not about the data roles and responsibilities. Yeah.
Right. So there will be a crosswalk involved. So it depends on where you're coming from. If you're coming from, you know, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, they have different, you know, security structures. But typically what it means is that, say you have a responsibility in EBS that this person belongs to, that responsibility will map to a set of privileges that are available in the cloud. And so that will be kind of one-to-one mappings. And so it's typically just like all the other conversion pieces. Let's take employees. You'll load the employees. You'll enable something called auto provisioning. That'll give you employee self-service. That'll give you manager self-service. So now the managers can do their work. Then you will use APIs to automatically create the roles and privileges that are available in the cloud for them to use. So that's typically how it does it. And then when that happens, the employee will get a notification that says, welcome to the cloud, and they'll log in, and lo and behold, they'll have the privileges they have.
Right. Around that similar topic is another question which talks about APIs to view database package, source code, and cloud. Do we have any APIs to view database package, source code, and cloud?
I'm not sure if you do. So if you're in the cloud, you have access to something called BI Publisher. BI Publisher, a lot of you probably know. The data dictionary has come over from EBS to the cloud, so you can look at some views. Like all source view will allow you to then look at the underlying PL SQL code that's there. And so you'd have to look at why you'd want to look at that. The app schema is gone, but there's another schema that's called Fusion, and the Fusion schema is where you're going to find your PL SQL code. So you'll be able to select data from there, build a giant report if you want to look at a package to see how Oracle's implemented it. The thing you can't do, though, is use an API to update that source code. That's no longer something you can do. You don't have write access to it.
Right. So there is a way to look at the code that you can see what it is doing and understand about it.
Yes.
From the Fusion schema.
Yes, the Fusion schema, and you can look at all of the underlying PL SQL. You can look at the tables. All of that is still going to be available view only.
Right. Okay. We'll go with the slides, and then there are a couple of questions which we'll handle later. Scott, go ahead.
Okay. Just one final one, and it's kind of the controversial one. It's define the. Can we go back? Yeah, define the training plan. So why would we start to train people before the project even begins? And I think that comes from, what I've seen on these projects. Typically, as nice as it would be to leisurely go through this project over a year or 2 years, typically the budget is set and we have to run very, very quickly. So I'll bring on a team and we'll immediately start running 1,000 miles an hour. And we'll start using all the acronyms that are available in cloud, and we'll go very quickly. And I've seen the deer in the headlights look from the user community because they just don't even understand what we're doing, and it can add a lot of anxiety. And so my recommendation is, you get a little SWAT team, maybe 2, 3, 4 people, and you just get the primer in place so that they understand what some of these things are, like OTBI, EPBCS, some of these acronyms that we throw out there. Make sure they kind of understand at a high level what they are, because I think that will be a bridge to kind of the middle of the project where we really start our formal plan. And so, Hackett can start helping you with that. You can go to Oracle University. We have our own training team. We can provide that primer to kind of get you started thinking about what's going to be important from a training perspective. And that's really important for your developer teams, for your DBA teams, because they have to retool a little bit as they move to the cloud.
Right. I think we'll go ahead and take questions. I know there are a couple of questions. Let me get the chat window here.
Right.
So that we can take them. I think one question that was there was about when I have customizations, does that mean SAS is not an option? I think we spoke around that. You could still use SAS. You could have other things like PaaS and still manage integrations, bolt-ons, develop from there. It could be a PaaS, it could be other tools, and as long as you could connect through REST or web services, things like that, you could still manage and do that. There's another question on which costing is better compared to bare metal to cloud applications? Scott, you want to answer that?
Yeah, it's okay. So I know what bare metal is. So did you say costing?
Yeah, I think the question is about which one would be better from a cost angle, to go with bare metal or to go to SaaS, which is the cloud
Oh,
applications.
I see. So from a costing perspective,
Right.
most of our clients are going directly to cloud rather than doing the bare metal piece. I think that just lines you up for the future. There's just that seems to be the normal path is companies are making this transition. They're going to SaaS. They're getting on their update schedule, and they're allowing this innovation to kind of come to them piecemeal over time.
Right.
And I think costing, from a cost perspective, it probably makes the most sense too.
Right. Um, there one exception that we've seen. There are certain companies which want to really be on a capex model than an opex model from a business the way they are
Yeah,
set up. So if that's the case, might be bare metal still helps. And
yeah,
if they're very worried about retaining a lot of customization and they don't want to redo that in the new thing, they want to take slow steps, might be bare metal is an option. But
right.
otherwise, if you are willing to do the change, if you want to take all the new innovations that happen and make use of it, then I think going into cloud applications
Oh yeah,
seems
I
to be
think
the right.
yeah, regardless of what Oracle says about sustainability with EBS and that framework, I mean, the majority of their R&D right now is going into the cloud. I mean, their cloud portfolio is really where a lot of this is. So that's really where the thing is. I mean, the only other thing I can think of is, since we're talking kind of a global audience here, is data sovereignty. So Oracle will put their data in certain data centers, will be in certain countries. So if your data needs to be in, Poland or something like that, for example, that could be a consideration where you'd want to kind of maintain bare metal and make sure that you understand exactly where things are going to be.
Since you spoke about the global side of it, another consideration there is about the local, you know, which we used to call as localization in the
Localizations.
past.
Yes.
So might be there are certain localizations that are available from a tax angle, but there are certain that
Yes.
are not available for certain countries, like how the assets are managed from a tax angle or
Yes.
the localization around assets, things like that. So that's another consideration when you're a global company and wanting to move into this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that could add time. That could add time. Certainly around the taxing engine that's available. It's rolling out at a certain cadence. So, India tax is very, very complex. Brazil tax is very complex. So that can be a consideration when you're going forward. Can add some complexity.
Another question around where can we get the information about all the PL SQL APIs that we can use in the BI publisher to make updates on the interface or base tables?
Yeah, that's all publicly available. That's a nice thing. I mean, a lot of the other competitors of Oracle don't publicly announce what their API lists are, but Oracle does. So go out to oracle.com, and I can provide the actual list, but with a Google search, you'll be able to find it and get to the APIs. Look up the foundational side of things. The foundation APIs will provide some help there of how to get access to those APIs. And then the recommendation is, leverage an open source tool called SOAP UI. Oracle uses that internally. We use it as a team. Allows you to very easily go in and create payloads that can go into an Oracle instance and do that kind of lookup.
There's a question around, are there any lift and shift tools available for data migration? So there is two things here. When you talk about lift and shift, usually that's about moving on to a bare metal. That's how it's usually termed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if that's the question, yes, there are tools available from Oracle Cloud infrastructure. So when you take OCI, there are tools available and that can help you move from on-prem to cloud. So that's possible. And there are a few different options based on what hardware you're moving from. And if you're moving from Linux to Linux, there's better options. But if you're moving from different operating systems like AIX and Solaris to the to OCI, OCI would be on Linux only. So there will be different options when you do that. So that's possible. There's another question. How many hours of downtime is required to migrate data from on-prem to cloud? Example, if we have 5 terabytes of data.
Okay.
Again, if this is if lift and shift onto bare metal, I think that's a different story. And if you're doing to cloud applications, that's a different story. So if it is bare metal, there are ways to optimize it, and still that can be managed over a weekend, and still you could get that done. There are options like Fast Connect that can be used, and we could do it. If you're talking about moving to cloud applications, and that's 5 terabyte of data, that's a large amount of data, because usually you move open transactions and only the master data into cloud applications. And if that's 5 terabyte, that's a large data. Any thoughts from you, Scott, on that?
Well, the SaaS, the nice thing about the SaaS side is, you only have to do this data migration once, and your SaaS instance isn't even available until you say it's available. So a lot of times we'll start the cutover weeks in advance, and we'll just start taking data out of Oracle that's starting with what doesn't change very much, and at the end we'll pull the stuff that changes every day, like your open transactions, and move those in. So typically that's orchestrated over a long period of time, and so that's less of a consideration than you've got an open instance, you need to take it down, you need to convert data and bring it back up.
Right. Okay. There's a question around EBS certification on Oracle PaaS. So I think the question refers to using database as a service on PaaS, and if they use EBS on that in the bare metal, how does the certification work? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a certification path for Oracle Developer. That specific one, you'd probably be covered. It would probably, help. I don't know if it's as targeted as what we're asking on this question about databases as a service, bare metal, all of those. But certainly Oracle is broadening their certification paths, and a lot of your team is certified as well. My
right.
team as well. It's a very big priority for us.
Yeah. And there's another question around, is cloud model SaaS PaaS as robust and flexible as EBS suite with respect to customization and stability? Yeah, I think it's even far more better than the EBS is what I would say.
Robust certainly, yes. Flexible, it depends on how you look at it. In EBS, they basically give you all the source code, and they give you a very mature Chemly model for doing anything you want. And so, is that a good thing to have that kind of flexibility? Maybe not. We've had a lot of customers that have customized beyond recognition, and they call us for help. We don't know what to do here. So I would say that you're much better to go into this path, and we do have a lot of flexibility, but maybe not as much flexibility as what you'd have in an environment where you can do anything you want.
Right. But I think from a stability point of view, it's definitely much more robust and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But what is your thoughts on performance in terms of people trying to get responses on local on-prem their data center based applications that they use, and compare that to the cloud applications in terms of response times and performance, Scott?
Yeah, so Oracle has a single release for every single client in the world, so the very largest, and then startups with 60 employees. So it's important to understand that everything that you have in your environment, your database, your CPU, your memory, that can all be tailored for what your performance is. And so during the implementation, you'll normally do some kind of stress test, and Oracle can help with, they have a product called OATS, Oracle Application Testing Suite, that can be used, and Oracle will run a service. It'll go in and it'll really stress your system out, and then you can up your performance or lower it. And so that's available. That should be done during your implementation, and that gets your performance running the way it needs to be. And then, if you have a long-running report that someone's run, something like that, it's not a DBA looking that up anymore. It's an Oracle service request. And then, Oracle also gives you something called a customer success manager throughout these implementations. They can help you prioritize those, get those into the right hands, and make sure that you have reasonable performance.
Okay. There's a question around data warehouse. How do you see customers handle on-prem data warehousing when moving their ERP to SaaS, and they still have other on-prem applications feeding data to the data warehouse?
Yeah, so essentially you have an ERP project, you have an established data warehouse, you're replumbing, essentially. You're taking your extracts, your ETL process, whether it's Informatica or whatever, that's going from your EBS, that gets turned off. What gets turned on is your extract process out of cloud to do that. And so there are a lot of ways to get incremental data out of cloud, to get full file feeds out of cloud, stage that in your data warehouse and move that in. So as long as your data cubes don't change a lot when you're moving from EBS to cloud, that's something you certainly can include within the overall implementation.
There's another question around specific applications and are they ready? Do you think that SEM, manufacturing, and CRM, very specifically field service, are they ready for prime time in cloud applications? What is the adoption like for these areas?
CRM was really the first one that came to adoption. So that's very mature. HCM is very mature. There's still a lot of changes coming in through HCM, but they're normally, improvements. SCM is the one, especially if you get into the manufacturing side. A little bit of discrete manufacturing is there. Process manufacturing, if you're building formulas and recipes, you may want to take a closer look at your functionality to see if it's something that you can do. So the simplest of manufacturing clients, yes, but if you have a full cycle, manufacturing, you might want to take a closer look as you're going into it. That's something we can help you with.
Right. In case of huge old legacy data where client wants to store as read-only, is there any method available in data migration? I think there it will be a PaaS model that you will have to take like a database as a service, move your data there, convert that into read-only, and then use that. It will not be there by default into SaaS. If you move that data into SaaS, and you want to control that portion alone to be read-only, I don't think that's going to be possible. Scott?
No. I mean, the nice thing about database as a service is it uses autonomous database. So it's kind of the same theme that Oracle is doing. Is all the patching is automatic. There's no DBA. Security patches come in. It's optimized. It's tuned. And so that's a really strong option at a decent price point. So I look at database as a service, and then you have rights to be able to go in there, make it read only, control it as you would a normal DBA would.
Around that same topic, Scott, I know in EBS we have some roles where you could define them and say these people can only do queries read only from the application. So is there a way that can be done on the cloud applications as well from a user point of view?
Yeah. I mean, you have to be a little careful because the The security model is extremely granular. So technically you can go in and you can say, I have this form, I want this user to not have access to this field, or I want them to be read-only on this field. But you could imagine that can get pretty labor-intensive, harder to maintain as people come in and leave and things like that. But the short answer is yes, that is certainly possible.
Good. We are 5 minutes over time. There's there's one other question that I think we'll take, and then might be we'll
Okay.
wrap it up.
Okay.
Can you suggest some open source tools for data profiling and transformation of legacy data?
Yes. Open source, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So data profiling, a couple of tools out there. We use Talend quite a bit. You might have heard of Talend. It's an ETL tool. That's very good for profiling, where you can bring in data. You can maybe even do some web services to check to see if Oracle's going to accept that or not, come back with an error. Another profiling tool out there, very, very common, is Alteryx. So Alteryx is a very popular tool that allows you to do very, very complicated things within Excel. So you can take something in Excel over here, you can compare and contrast it to something over there, you can build your rules in there. So those are two examples. As far as an open source, you'd have to see if there's trial versions of that. I mean, we use a corporate license for some of those.
Right. I think we'll check that and then get back to him, the details if
Okay.
there is any open source. We'll do that. So I think we are already 6 minutes over time. Thanks all the audience for attending this and making this a lively, interactive session. Thanks to Scott joining in very early from Portland.
Thank you.
And we will stay in touch and be safe and enjoy the new normal of life. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you.